Good afternoon and welcome to AutoCAD Electrical Terminals. My name is Robert Savage. Our agenda for today, first of all, we're going to do an introduction and tell you about myself. Then we're going to go over our learning objectives. We're going to have a short PowerPoint slide, and then we're going to go into a demonstration. So again, my name is Robert Savage. I'm based out of Knoxville, Tennessee. I have a manufacturing background. I have been working in the mechanical design industry for over 30 years. I have seen lots of softwares come and go, have spent a lot of time in various mechanical design software. I also spent time doing electrical design from a standpoint of a mechanical designer. And I know that sounds like an odd comparison there. I was given a markup or a document that says this is what I need my electrical design to be. I would then go in and enter that into the AutoCAD Electrical. I say that because I'm not an electrical engineer. So some of the things I do in here for this demonstration would not make sense in the real world. It's not how you would build it, but it does demonstrate the software. So I'll try to keep that to a minimum though. All right, so let's start out with what is a terminal block. Typically, a terminal block is just an electrical connection, okay? It's where I can take one wire and connect it, and then on the other side connect another wire that's going to go out to a particular direction, or multiple wires, depending on how it's set up. Now, these are typically done in unison or as a group, and they're called terminal strips. Okay, so a terminal strip will have a particular activity or setup that it's intended for. All right, so here's a couple of examples of terminals and a couple of examples of different ways that terminals are set up. They can be relatively basic or rather complex. So when we get into the difference between a single level terminal and a multi-level terminal, this is a visual effect of what we're talking about. A single level terminal has one connection on the left to one connection on the right, and they're typically spring-loaded or screwed in to get a good firm connection. Where a multi-level will say that I have either 2, 3, 4 connections that are stacked and connected to each other. Okay. Now, when we talk about from a drawing standpoint, there are multiple different variations of terminal symbols that we can use, depending on how much information we want displayed in the drawing. So let's break them down by set. You have a square set, which can be just a basic shape with a wire number, terminal number, wire numbers and terminal numbers. And then we get into the round variation, the hexagon variation, the diamond variation, the triangle variation. Again, it's just different variations, okay? And it all is based on what you need displayed in your drawing. So as we place them, this is what they look like. So here is really what we're talking about. And so instead of having a mass of these type of things in there, you may have a list or a stack of them, as I call, which is what we've got here, all right? And these are different terminal block connections that we're using as a terminal strip. And the terminal strip indicator is this down here at the bottom. It tells me which terminal strip, what the terminal number is, and what the location of that is. Once we get the visual representation in our schematic file, then we can come into our terminal strip editor where we can put in more information, things like wire numbers, devices that are connected, jumper information. And this has 4 different areas that we can put information into. The terminal strip editor, which is the first one here. Then we get into the catalog assignment. So here we're telling it the manufacturer of the terminal and the catalog number of the actual terminal. Now this is important because the catalog determines really whether it's a single or a multi-level. Right? If I've got the wrong catalog item in there, then I may come up as a single level when I'm intending for a multi-level. So we'll go through that and we'll talk about it as we get further into this. So then the third tab in there is the cable information. So what cable I'm coming into and what wire I'm coming into, excuse me, the location of that information, not only where it's coming in, but the location going out. And then the fourth tab. The fourth tab here is where we're actually setting up the information we want on the panel side of the document. And that really breaks down into 3 categories. The graphical terminal strip, which is what you see here, a tabular terminal strip, and a jumper chart. Okay, now we also have an area down here for setting up what information we want displayed beside of this. So if we look at this right now in our preview here, we're not seeing any information on either side of this. What we do is we select this area over here to define what information we're going to show up on our drawing for this. So if we want one that calls out our wire numbers, we can have it call out the wire numbers. If we wanted to have wire number and terminal, cable, and wire only, there's several different configurations. And as you start learning the codes in these, and I'll show you those here in a minute, you can actually manually down here enter that information as to what you want coming in and going out. And then you have an option to scale this or rotate it as you place it. All right. So again, up here at the top, you're going to determine what type of information you're putting on there. All right. Once you set that, you'll set the graphical layout of that information. You'll hit your update button here, make sure it looks the way you want it, and then select the insert. Now, after you insert it, it's going to look something like this, where you're coming in and you're displaying the visual representation of those terminals. And you're representing them in a series there. Now, behind that, you have what's called a DIN rail. And I'll show you even putting in a DIN rail on this. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do here is kind of review some that are already there and then walk you through a quick variation of one of these. Okay. So in this drawing here, I already have a ladder in place as well as a set of terminal information. So if I right click on this and say edit component here, I can look at the information that I have here. First of all, down here at the bottom, I have manufacturer and catalog. Remember, this is the information that determines whether this is a single level, a multi-level, what power it is, all kinds of different things. All right. So there's many variations of that. Now, once I have set that information up, then I can come in and go into my terminal editor select which one I'm working on. This is the TB1. Yep, there we go. Down here, I'll say edit. And this is how the information is viewed. All right. So here again on this first page here, we have a multi-level. Right. We have multiple of them there put together. We have the wires coming in, both the wire number and the type. Apparently we don't have any jumpers on this one, and then the wire coming out and where it's going out to. All right, down here at the bottom, we can adjust things like properties, the terminal information, the spares, the destinations, the jumpers. Right. Over here, it's similar information to what we had on the previous one, but again, they've added in the manufacturer and catalog information. All right. Now, if I go over to the cable information, then in there we're looking at the actual cable information, and this one may or may not be using a cable to show information. All right. So let's go ahead and build one here. And we'll just build a short one so that we don't have too much going on there. All right. So I'm going to start out on the schematic side. So I'm going to go to my schematic and I can come into my icon menu, go into my terminals, select the type terminal I want, and insert it. All right. I can do that one at a time, or I can do that as a multiple insert. Well, the actual type I'm going to use is a multiple insert, so I'm going to go ahead and cancel this. And I'm going to come into my multiple insert tool. And again, still come into my terminal strip editor and pick the type of display that I want. So if I come in here and say that I want round with wire numbers, I can then start putting my information in. But the easiest way for me to put the information in is actually going to be using what's called a fence. So if I type F on my keyboard and hit enter, that's going to put me into fence mode. And I'm going to pick a point above the line where I want it to start and go through the lines that I want that to be incorporated on. All right. So after I pick that point, I can then hit enter and it will come in and say, all right, here's the first one. Do you want to keep that? I'm going to say okay. And it's going to pop up here and ask me what information I want in this. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is come in here and say, all right, what's my location on this? So I'm going to browse this and I'm going to say that this is actually on the machine side. And I'm going to call this all right. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go down here to my catalog lookup. And I'm going to make sure that I'm selecting the one that I want. So I'm going to clear part of this out. I know I want to use the automations direct version. Well, And my type I want is a multi-level. So I'm going to select my multi-level here, and I'm going to say OK. And I'll give this an item number. Okay. And I can go into my modify here. And as you can see here, I've got information there. All right. I'm actually going to back some of this information out and change it a little bit, just so that you can see how the different information fits in this. Okay. So that was one variation of a setup, and I'm going to actually do a slightly different variation here. All right. This time I'm going to select I want round with terminals. And I'm going to do my fence. Still going to draw my line down through there. Enter. I'll keep that one. I'll change this to a different strip. And then I'll set this number here. And I'm going to change that to 1L. And I'm going to use the Phoenix contact. And I'll go ahead with that number there. And I could go ahead and put in a description here if I want. But if I say OK, it's going to prompt me for my next one. All right. But here's where you kind of have to be a little bit careful because of some of the default settings in here. All right. I am going to keep this one, and I do want the dialog box to come back up. But by default here, it tells you it wants to hide the tag and installation location. Well, I prefer to have those visuals, so I have to uncheck that. So I'm going to say OK, and then I'm going to come in here. And if you'll notice here, this is putting me to the upper of this second of the next terminal. Well, that's not really what I want. I want one. I'm going to go with the M. But I'm going to come in here to modify, and I'm going to come here and say, all right, I want this associated to the 1L. In the lower, and I'm going to call it 1M, and say OK. So now that is the lower segment of that. Okay. I'll continue on to the next one. Say OK. And this is going to be the 2L. And I don't need to change anything in this because I do want it to be the upper level of that. And then I'll come into this one and change that to 2M. And again, do my add modify, associate that to the 2L, lower, associate, say OK, and then continue on. I think I only have one more, but that's okay. So this is going to be the 3L. And that's it. Now, what I want to point out, though, is that if I come back now and come down here to another level on here, and I want to insert an individual one, I can come in and I'm going to go back to this one. I'll insert it down here, and I'm automatically going to come in, let this go back to that same location, but this is going to be the 3M. I'm going to add modify. I'm going to come into here. I'm going to go to here, attach that to the lower, and associate it. Okay, which just goes to show that I don't have to have them necessarily sequenced to each other. Okay. I can also insert into this representations of a jumper. All right, so if I want to come in and put in a jumper, then I would simply come in and insert the jumper into this, or I can do the jumper at the layout side of this. Okay, so I'm going to go now over to the other side of my drawing, and this is what the actual terminal strips look like once they're inserted. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go over to my panel side and I'm going to go to my terminal footprint editor. And the one I'm going to work with here is this one here. And I'm going to say that I want to edit that. And now I can come in and start inserting my information that I want on this. All right. So I can add spares. All right. So if I want to come in here and insert a spare into this, then I can. All right. I can also go to my catalog information here, my cable information, right? And in here, it's showing me the visual representation of this. Now, if I want the wire numbers beside this, I can select this and see this %W. That's what I was talking about with the codes. If I come down here to wire number combined tag, I get a %4, %W. So these are the different codes that I'm talking about. All right. So once I've set that, I can then come over here and say update, and that's what that information is going to look like when I put it into my file. All right. Now, again, I can show this in different ways. You've got the graphical strip. I can do a tabular terminal, where if I look at that, I'm creating a table for that. And typically I'm doing that and putting it on a new drawing, so that if I have a drawing for that, or if I want that in a separate drawing, I can do that. I can also put in a jumper chart if I have a jumper on this. All right. But we're going to go back to this and add that in there. All right. So as I go to add this, this is going to allow me to put that in. And now I'm seeing the representation of that. Now, if I want to add in a DIN rail for this, I can come in, go to my icon menu here, go to my DIN rail area, pick my type of DIN rail, and then from here I can say whether I want it to be horizontal or vertical. Obviously I'm making mine vertical. And the rail information, I can come in and enter that, or I can use the pick rail information, which means I can come over here and say, all right, I want my rail to go from there to there. So that's giving me the coordinates of it and the length of it. Well, I'm going to make this, I'm going to change this number a little bit. I'm going to say that I want it to be a 7 and, all right. So from here, I can put in my information on this, say okay, and as you can see, it inserts that and puts it into the background. All right. Now, that's just kind of the general and the basics of terminals, okay? And inserting and using terminals in a drawing. Now, let's go back and talk a little bit about editing terminals. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in and modify some of this information so that we can see how a modification to this affects particular pieces of information. So I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to come in and say edit component here. And as you can see, now I'm showing my different information here. I can come in again, put in my descriptions for this. I can change my information here. Right. Now, if I decide that I need more of these in here, again, I can still come back in here and let's just go back to menu. I'll go back into my terminals. All right. So now in here, again, it defaulted back to that same one I was doing before. But I think I'm going to use a different one. All right. Let's see. Actually, one I want the multi-level D10. All right. So this one's going to be a D10 from Automations Direct instead of the other kind. All right. So basically, I just want to point out that I can mix and match this information. All right. So now I'll come back in, go ahead and add in one more down here so that I put something on that other level with that. So this one will be 4M. And go to the 4L, lower, associate. All right. So now I've added to this. I want to go over here back to this side. I'm going to go again into my editor now. I'll save this. And which one was that? Oh, now I got to go back and verify. Let me make sure which one I was working on. TB2, not -2. All right. what I thought. I just wanted to make sure. TB2 down here. I'm going to say edit. And if you'll notice, it has added the next level down here. All right. So that now when I come into my layout, as you can see, this is laying out different. I think I had actually grabbed the wrong set earlier and was showing the wrong terminal blocks on that. So I do apologize for that. So again, I can come in and set up my information, make any adjustments I need in here. And this just kind of shows how different variations in terminal blocks. I didn't tell it to insert. Can still exist on the same terminal strip. All right. So again, I'll come in here, put in a DIN rail on this. And normally I would come in and look for the information here rather than just lining it out like that. But one of the main things we're doing here though really is setting up for a bill of material type information and not really setting up information in there. Okay. So the next thing I want to do in here is set up a jumper in here. Oh, I hit the wrong button there. All right. So I went into the edit jumper. Oddly enough, you do edit jumper here. You select what you're jumpering, and then you can come in and define that jumper in here. And say okay with that. And you can even come back and physically draw in the jumper, but you don't have to do that because you can do it on really kind of on this side also. So let's go back over here now and go into our editor. All right. So now, as you can see, I'm showing a jumper between 3M and 4M. All right. So it's displaying over here. So if I go over to my layout and I say update there, I wouldn't see anything here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a jumper chart. Now I'm going to say update. And this is what my jumper chart would look like. I can say insert and drop this over here beside of that particular jumper chart. All right. And so that's what a jumper chart looks like on there. Okay. So let's see, is there anything else we need to do to this just to make sure? So I guess we can go in here and actually wire in that jumper. And we could even trim the wire off there so that um, we're showing that. Probably should have put that on the other side, but you get the general information on that. Other than that, I appreciate it, and hopefully I'll talk to you in a class somewhere down the line.